Can I include your funny dog voice on the podcast? I don't have to attach it to your name.
Of course. It's not funny. It's just how it is.
I should introduce you and say
You can.
that you are...
I'm not ashamed of my dog voice, Annie.
You are one of my best friends, Melanie Friedson, a human owner. How do you refer to yourself when it comes to Herschel?
I'm his mom.
Okay. Mom to Herschel Stanley. 12-year-old Cavapoo.
Bichpoo.
A Bichpoo of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's the last day of the year, and I'm putting up the last podcast episode of the year. I wanted to say to listeners that if they have enjoyed this podcast this year, that maybe they could leave a review on iTunes or shop at storeforthedogs.com to support us. But I thought it would be more fun if it was in your dog voice than in my normal human voice.
Oh, okay.
So can you just say those things?
That?
Yeah.
If you like this podcast, please support us. Leave a good review on iTunes, or you can shop for us at storeforthedogs.com. This is Herschel Stanley Friedson's mom.
School for the dogs. For the dogs. School.
Jen Nastanski.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for being on School for the Dogs podcast, and thank you for being part of School for the Dogs since, what, has it been 2 months now? Something like that?
Something like that. Time is a little nebulous right now.
Remind me of your official title, because I'm bad with titles.
I'm a behavior therapy trainer.
And you've been doing private lessons, you've been doing day school, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Have you been doing both Misfits day school and regular day school?
Yeah, I haven't started puppy day school yet, but yep, I've been doing Misfits and day school.
Can you explain what those two things are to
Sure.
people who do not know our nomenclature?
Sure. So yeah, and it's been fun to learn too. So day school is a drop-off program, and the dogs come in the morning for a set amount of time for a 3-hour period, and we alternate sort of rest period, relaxation. We do some crate training. We only take between 3 and 6 dogs at a time. They have to generally like other dogs and be able to tolerate being in a crate or being in a pen. And we do sort of some controlled playtime. We try to pair the dogs by size or play style. We take lots of break periods to make sure the play is cooperative and safe. And then we get the dogs out one-on-one and just do some obedience training. If they're ready, we do loose leash walking around the neighborhood. We have quite a few neighbors who are friendly shopkeepers, and they invite us in. They do practice greetings with us. They're sort of always happy to help and visit with the dogs. Misfits is a program later in the day. That's a little bit more of a one-on-one program. These are dogs that can't tolerate being alone or watching while a trainer works with another dog. Dogs that can't get along with other dogs, that have leash reactivity, that just need a little bit more intense focus. Yesterday in Misfits, for example, I had a little Cavalier who is pretty low confidence in the city. He's new to the city, and he's been very fearful of dogs. So for his first Misfit class, we had him paired with a fake dog. We had a stuffed dog in a pen as sort of the distraction. And then this week in Misfits, I had my real dog, Pop-Tart, Poppy, and she was sort of a helper dog, also behind a pen. And he's not quite ready to play with her, but he's starting to warm up, getting more confident. It's a safe way for him to interact without being overwhelmed. And he's starting to make real progress. So he's more a Misfit dog that needs a little bit more training and one-on-one attention than day school.
We should specify that we hold these at our studio, not in the owner's home. But you're also doing private training and day training.
I do. So I'm currently doing, I have a couple of regular day training clients. I take the dogs I go and pick the dogs up from the owner's home. and we go out for either an hour. I even have one dog that's up to 3-hour sessions. He has some kind of long socialization sessions. He's had some field trips with me. I've taken him in my car with my dog and gone to the park and walked around on leash together, help build his confidence around other dogs. So that is sort of training one-on-one from the owner's home.
And then you're also teaching classes, right?
Yep. I have started with Calm Canine, which is sort of a general obedience, but also a lot about relaxation and settling behaviors, especially in the city and around distractions. And I am starting to teach prep school, which is a basic obedience class, also with sort of some mild distraction work.
I feel like I'm so unused to hearing the word obedience.
Well, and I probably have some terms that are a little old school. I definitely I'm a reformed dog snob. I used to show dogs in obedience. So the word obedience comes out of my mouth a lot.
Well, I think obedience has come to mean manners in the world of dogs, regardless of whether or not it is about obeying.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. It's more cooperative now than
we aim to make it more cooperative, but there's still, I mean, I grew up calling dog owners masters, which seems crazy to me a little bit now, but did not.
Well, and I know I still automatically say owner, which is pretty outdated. I think the move has been more to the word guardian.
Yeah. Well, we like on social media and whatever, we usually say like the dog's human, which, I mean, I still say owner too. In the same way, I guess I still sometimes say obedience just to like speak a language that people understand.
Exactly. It's kind of a common shorthand.
So. And legally, you are the dog's owner.
Right.
Legally, dogs are property. So it's kind of like an accurate term.
It is. That's sort of the unfortunate part of it, that the dogs have fewer rights. We are their owners. They are property.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's actually like you could say there's like a master and slave thing going on.
Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Stockholm syndrome. Like,
well, but it's a step up from how most domesticated animals live in this world, which is like not,
Well, and it's wild.
It's not taking naps on West Elm couches.
Sure. Well, it's wild to me how the expectations for dogs have changed over the years. Dogs in the home, dogs' behaviors, how we approach those behaviors. There's been so many shifts kind of back and forth. And I think, at least in New York City in particular, I feel like I'm seeing owners wanting a more positive slant and a kinder, more cooperative kind of training versus the old rigid obedience standards that I feel like there used to be. And I started with Scorch, my AKC Novice A obedience dog and Rally A obedience dog. I toyed a little bit with competing with my mixed breed, but he couldn't compete in AKC. So with my dog Scorch, he's 14 now, but when he was about a year old, we were starting to look into competing and taking more advanced classes, and there was a big divide happening. And it was very hard to find trainers past the basic level who weren't using punitive methods. And part of why we didn't continue, we titled up to a particular level of obedience. Oh my goodness, it was so long ago. So we were, he was a young man when we were training, and this was in Florida as well. This was not in New York. He's the love of my life. First of all, he's my heart dog. He is a Border Collie Samoyed cross, as it turns out. Great dog to work with, but he would get very frustrated with me. He was pretty, well, he still is. He's a very high drive dog, and he's pretty fast and intense, and he tended to forge ahead. And I was unwilling to give him leash pops. I was uncomfortable. I tried it. I didn't like it. I had to do it with other types of career training.
Let's back up a little bit. How did you first start working with dogs in any capacity?
Oh my. I was 17 years old, and I was kind of dog obsessed. We had a Cairn Terrier that I was taking to obedience classes, and she wasn't that into it, but I think I was hooked. And I was volunteering at an animal shelter, and working at PetSmart as a teenager. And some of the trainers kind of took me under their wing. And that's when I got introduced to the world of competitive obedience and rally. I was interested in agility as well, but money and time and being very young, I had to pick a sport, and I picked obedience because that's where all my friends were going. And they all had fancy purebreds, and I had this shelter mutt. But we still, I enjoyed it. My shelter mutt had some health problems, so he unfortunately couldn't compete very long. And that's when I stumbled upon this oops litter of border collies, and the best dog I've ever had.
Can you explain what obedience is, the way you're referring to
Sure.
it?
So when I say that too, when I tell people, oh yeah, he's got obedience titles, they're like, oh, what does he know? Does he know shake? Oh, well, no, like he kind of does, but he's not into that. People I think don't realize that there's still competitive dog sports like this. Obviously, the agility is what people are generally familiar with as a competitive sport, where the dogs are going over the jumps and the ramps. And then there's conformation showing, which is like Westminster, where the dogs are competing to a standard, a breed standard. In obedience, there are several levels, and some of the requirements have changed over the years. But generally, the dog is expected to work with the handler on leash and off in an obedience ring with a judge present. You are not allowed to. You're only allowed to speak or give commands at particular times. You're only allowed to praise your dog briefly between exercises. They have to work basically for
what are the exercises?
So the exercises, the judge lines up the dog and the owner, and they call out a healing pattern. So they'll tell the dog and handler to forward, and the handler will tell their dog to heel. And the dog is expected to walk along at the left side. Generally looking up at the handler is sort of the fashion nowadays. When it originally started, I think the dogs could look ahead, and the judge calls forward, left turn, halt. And when the judge calls halt, you have to come to a stop, and without giving any commands, your dog is supposed to sit down next to you. Then when the judge calls forward again, you start off, you can say heel, and the dog is expected to return to a brisk pace next to you. They call changes of pace. They call fast and slow. And then you repeat the healing exercise off leash. You also do a figure 8 pre-COVID. The figure 8 would be the same healing position, the dog at the left side. The judge calls forward, and there would be 2 stewards, 2 volunteers standing still in the ring, and you would do a figure 8 around them. I think post-COVID, I believe they're using cones, and they're not going back to humans, which is I'm appreciative of that. It just sort of makes things a little easier to arrange for obedience trials and distractions. But so then after that, there's a recall. The dog is left on a sit stay. The handler goes across the ring, that waits for the judge's signal. You call the dog to come. The dog sits in front of you and then is called to heel. All of this is on the judge's command. So it's exercises like that. In more advanced levels, there's also some elements of jumping, retrieves over a jump. The hardest thing for us, and part of the reason that I stopped advancing, was the stays. Scorch was able to do it, but in the first level of obedience, the companion dog title, it's a 1-minute sit stay and a 3-minute down stay in a group with the handlers across the ring. And the dogs...
Wait, just while we're talking, I'd like to look at, what do I even look up on obedience dog training? I get terrible videos.
Oh, okay. So I would look up,
what do I Google?
AKC competitive obedience. Maybe I would try that. See, and this is sort of the problem. The word obedience, I think the connotations, when the sport started, it was very old school. Lots of shepherds and big dogs and army trainers, and it's changed, but the culture kind of hasn't caught up all the way yet, if that makes sense. I can send you some videos of Scorch working. I do have some YouTube videos of him.
So this was your first introduction then to dog
Yes,
training?
I mean, yeah, this was really, at the time I was doing some pet training. I also did some competitive
How
classes.
were you doing pet training? You were doing pet training as...
So at PetSmart, I ended up actually going through their apprentice program. God, this was like 19 years ago now.
Wow, what was that like? Was that like more old school?
No, actually, it was pretty good. Actually, at the time, it was pretty clicker training, very reward heavy. You were not allowed to do corrections, if I remember correctly. It was actually pretty pleasant. I ended up with a couple of regional trainers, and I shadowed their classes. You know, I do feel like the big box stores do have some good trainers that, you know, they sort of get a reputation for you don't know what you're going to get. But I worked with some great trainers there. I really met some very talented people, and they pulled me into other areas of dog training too. There was a big manual. There was a kind of a guidebook and curriculum. There might have been a test. I can't remember. And there was some shadowing as well as assisting at the time. Again, I'm not sure if it's still like that now. At the time, the training director in the area, in the Florida area, was pretty on her game. She had a good team under her. So I got lucky to start with people that were involved in other areas of dog training as well.
So you sent me this video of you doing some obedience work that I'm looking at now, and I wanted to try and explain it to those who are listening.
Yes. So he's saying the only things he's saying are forward. A few times, and this is very minor stuff. So Scorch is right next to me, and very attentive.
You're in like
this
a
level,
pen,
we're completely off leash. So you'll see the stewards come in and set up for the figure eight. That was he loved that part. He liked showing off.
You're alone. He's on your left side.
Oh, I would love to. This was so much
fun. The judge
is
following you, kind of. And is he giving you commands?
And I believe, especially with COVID, they started doing a lot more virtually. It is about precision. So in the first part, yes. Oh, yes, this was his favorite. He was always very vocal for this part.
We should do classes.
So it is about precision. They do take off points for how straight he sits, how straight he is in the heel position. So initially, because he was so excited to be in the ring, he got some points off for being really a little bit wide. So his rear end stuck out a little bit.
And now you're throwing
that he's a little
more
focused and a little more engaged in what he's doing, he's sort of tightened up his position. So then you start with 200 points, and they kind of mark you off for every little error. And I also threw the dumbbell, and it landed outside of the ring. So the judge had to stop all the proceedings and give me back the dumbbell. And poor Scorch was nearly vibrating with excitement and desperation to get to the dumbbell. There's as much human element as there is dog element. So it really is cooperative. Yes, I was terrible. I was so nervous in the ring. It got even worse when I was in the ring. And this was for the title. So you need to pass. Basically, you start with 200 points. You need to get a passing score and pass each element of the exercises.
Did you have dumbbell throwing sessions?
So this was for our title, and we did get it.
There.
Yes, we did use a clicker for some of that. Yes, I absolutely. I mean, I tell people when I'm like, oh, just noodle and do a figure eight around distractions.
Walk nicely,
I mean, this is literally
right next to them,
that's how I taught it. Everybody asks me about when
you're using when you're teaching
on walks, especially in the city.
Random clients,
or if I'm bringing my dog to work with me, it's all training. It's all I'll work on heel position and I'll work on figure eights, and it doesn't have to be perfect when we're out and about, but it's the same skills. They're just a little bit looser out and about, but it's the same thing. The other type of obedience we titled into was rally, which is a little bit of a lighter version of obedience. Yes. It's a little more exciting and probably a better starter for some people in dogs than competitive obedience. You can speak to your dog a little bit more in the ring. There's a lot more interesting movements it can be a lot less
What I
repetitive.
know about
I
Rally
used
is
to
it
teach
looks a
Rally
lot like what
classes
you were
for
just
fun
doing. It's
because
just you're following
again, it's just something
signs
different to
that
do
are
with your
written
dogs
down
and
on
something
the
to mix up the
ground.
walk
So much
sometimes.
fun.
Yes. Well, there's sort of one more big step. I mean, I did pet training for a few years in Florida, and I also was a vet tech, on the job trained vet tech for 2 years, which was
You were doing
amazing,
this
and I learned a
stuff
lot.
in
But I
Florida,
also learned that I
and then at
preferred
some point you
behavior.
ended up
Um,
in New
so
York,
then
in the
I
rescue
applied
world.
for a job as an apprentice guide
Connect the
dog
dots for
trainer
me.
at a Southeastern Guide Dogs. And that was sort of it. They had their own apprenticeship program, and I learned how to train guide dogs. I applied and just I ended up, I guess, passing the tests, and I started out training the adult dogs. So the dogs in the program get they're bred on campus, and the dogs are raised by puppy raisers for a year to a year and a half, and then the dogs after that they get some basic obedience while they're with puppy raisers, and then they come to the campus and get trained daily. They live on campus and they get trained daily by the guide dog trainers for a few months. We go on all kinds of field trips, teach them all kinds of commands around stopping at curbs, finding obstacles, and then they get matched with clients, with students, visually impaired students. So the organization has a fantastic set of trainers, but the guide dog training world and the service dog training world at the time was pretty reluctant to add food into their training, or a lot of reinforcers. It was mostly praise-based training. We had some, the kind of the old school training collars. That was tough for me, after I'd been sort of struggling with this divide that I was seeing in pet training. I was kind of thrown back into it again in guide dog training. And my boss, the director of training, Rick, he's a great trainer. And even though we came from different backgrounds and we had different training styles, I'd like to think there's a lot of mutual respect between us. He was a very, very good trainer, very unemotional, very fair. So even though we trained differently, I could see how the dogs responded so well to him. And we talked a lot about our training philosophies. And I had a particular dog that I enjoyed working with named Freckles. And Freckles was a little golden retriever, Labrador retriever cross, but she had a white blaze up her nose with freckles on it, hence the name. And she was really struggling with the training. She couldn't quite get matched with anybody. She had like lackluster in her harness. And Rick sat me down and said, all right, you can try clicker training with Freckles. And if you can make this dog a guide dog, then we will try clicker training. Because one of the other schools was starting to investigate it. We weren't sure if we wanted to. So I started working Freckles with food, and she got matched in my next class, and she retired as a guide dog. She just passed, I believe, last year. But she was a working guide dog, and she was fabulous at it. She went to college with a young girl who has now graduated, is on her third guide dog. And we did end up doing more positive training after that. And I actually switched over to the puppy raising program and worked with the puppy raisers all over the Southeast. They have 250 of them. And Scorch, my dog in the videos that I showed you, he was my right-hand man. He traveled with me everywhere, was a demo dog. Sometimes he was rude. I definitely had to learn some lessons about controlling a big, goofy male dog who might be pushy with some of the other dogs, because Scorch had some strong opinions about some of the intact males in the program. But oh, imagine that. He taught me a lot, boy. He was a little different than the Labradors. Yes. I know. I always say in the neighborhood, I'm always trying to go incognito. I don't want my neighbors to know what I do. They see the reality sometimes when I'm tired and don't feel like training.
He wasn't a perfect angel every moment.
His leash manners were terrible, by the way. His whole life, this dog who heals beautifully in all these videos. couldn't get him to loose
That's an
leash walk to save my
expectation
life.
of
Now,
dog
finally, at the
trainers,
age of like
dogs, that they should
12,
be
he started getting there, and
perfect
14, like we got it.
everywhere.
So, I mean, it's not easy even for trainers. Yes, so I was sort of the rep for the school, and obviously the local groups in Florida I could see more often, but they were groups of volunteers. They would have like one volunteer group leader called an area coordinator. So they would hold regular meetings, and basically I would go out to a meeting, and if they wanted me to teach,
you were going around the country
teach
talking
like a new
to
skill.
raisers?
I started doing like training videos and examples of new protocols, because again, we were kind of doing a switch. So a lot of the longtime raisers weren't familiar with. We didn't do clickers because that was just one too many things. But they weren't that familiar with marker words or using food in training. So we sort of, I flipped some things on its head a little bit, but I had such good, willing trainers, and our puppy raisers were so fantastic. And some of those dogs were so strong and powerful. And I don't know how those people handled it. They would hand the dog to me and be like, wow, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah, because I don't live with this dog. Like, this dog is a lot. Because some of those labs have rough adolescent periods. But it was so incredible. And I actually, that was a really good way to learn about genetics too, because I got to work with large populations of related dogs whose backgrounds we knew. They had a very closely sort of monitored breeding program and pedigrees, even though the dogs weren't registered. And we did bring dogs in from outside populations, and things like resource guarding. We would just see it right down a line of dogs, usually golden retrievers. Yeah, it was fascinating, and it would be in varying degrees in a litter, but you would see it. It was amazing. But all that being said, and I loved my job, I did not like Florida. I am a New Yorker. I'm from New York, and I hate the heat. I hate the humidity.
Wow, so interesting.
It just wasn't for me. So I stayed in Florida longer than I wanted to, due to family obligations. And as soon as I could, I applied for a job at the ASPCA. I didn't hear back. Yes, in New York City. So I got on a plane and I showed up at the door and said, hey, did you guys check out my resume? And at first they just kind of sent me on my way. And a friend of mine talked me into going back. I'd really wanted to work for them. I really was hoping it would be a match. And they called the HR people, pulled up my resume, and I got an interview, and I ended up getting the job. I ended up moving up a few months later. Started working I really missed shelter work. I had started volunteering at a shelter when I was 17 and starting my dog career. And that was really, I missed it. I was passionate about it. I liked guide dog training, but I really like working with the dogs that need help. That's really more my area of interest, I think. So I started working at CARE, which is a part of the ASPCA, and it is for dogs who are being held as evidence in cruelty investigations. So that was a very, very, very different set of dogs. And I probably learned more from those dogs than any book could have ever taught me. Those dogs were incredible, and it just... I couldn't even sum up how incredible it was to work with these dogs, some of which were, absolutely, I couldn't believe they were alive. And some of them would trust us right off the bat, even what people had done to them. And some dogs would come in and be absolutely fearful, but we needed to find a way to safely examine them. And they didn't want food, or they were guarding food, or they were trying to bite everybody. I had to kind of learn some different approaches, and really had to learn to read sort of micro expressions, predict how they were feeling. And it was incredible to see what responding to a dog and listening to them and letting them know that you hear what they're saying, how fast that built trust versus food, toys, anything else. Just like if a dog told me to back off, and we'd say, okay, that's fine. Just that little moment, you would see the little glimmer of hope. And those dogs were amazing. I fostered a few. I ended up adopting a dog, not from the ASPCA, but I did adopt a dog from a cruelty case in Massachusetts. So I also got a COVID puppy. Correct, until the case is resolved. And that's tough. There's a very dark emotional side to it that I mean, I was expecting, but you just can't prepare for it. And sometimes, the animals are held in limbo, and a big part of my job was determining
Those
safety
dogs
for
being held
adoption.
as
And I do
evidence,
feel very
they
strongly
can't
that
go anywhere, right?
shelters should be doing the best they can to place animals that are safe for the general population. So sometimes that meant making decisions on dogs. Bad dogs or aggressive dogs, they're not bad or aggressive all the time. Yes. Yes. That's why I was saying I've got some dogs I would do it for free. You can't control the aggression, but it's there.
Or they might be
Methods
considered
of training.
geniuses in other situations. We were just talking about the
different things that he would do, like room checks and car searches, and it was yeah.
Right. There was a website that we did
actually end up. It was hard to find.
That was like
in the shelter world, it can be hard to find.
Like, give us your dog and $40,000, and we will make him into a guard dog. And we were all saying, like, there are a lot of good guard dogs out there available for free. Take my guard dog, please.
My coworker Maria ended up fostering a dog from one of our cases that was a pretty, we were worried about him. He was a pit bull cross and fairly big, powerful dog, and he was just mouthing everybody. Didn't appear aggressive, but obviously the staff was, concerned about handling him. But we started working him, and we're like, man, this is a really, really cool dog. This is, sometimes the dogs that trainers like are the dogs that annoy everybody else, because we like dogs that are smart and like thinking 45 steps ahead and are really obnoxious. So that was this dog, and Maria, one of our trainers, ended up fostering him, and she does search and rescue with one of her personal dogs, and has a pretty good working dog background. So she did some assessments and videoed him, and he ended up going out. He's doing some kind of search. I believe he's a working canine, doing so nothing aggressive, but he is doing some kind of motivated searching. And so that was one of the best endings we got to see, was like a dog really doing what he wanted to do, and just what he was meant to do, apparently.
So this brings us back to what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, which is how important it is to, obviously, probably being held in this limbo for some of these dogs was like a better situation than whatever they had been living in.
Yes.
But
yes.
But more than that, how important it is to have. Part of being, I think, a dog lover is wanting to see dogs in their element as much as possible.
Well, and this dog was not a bad dog. Like this dog was not a bad dog, but in a pet home, he would have been a nightmare.
Right.
It would have been a nightmare.
But we were talking about it in terms of about clients who go to extraordinary lengths to make it possible to not have to rehome a dog, as if rehoming a dog is a failure, when actually in many situations rehoming the dog seems like would be the biggest success for the dog.
Sure.
At least, right?
Like if you think about if somebody has a I don't know, like a Scottish Terrier, and they're having a barking problem, and the dog is wanting to chase squirrels, and a Scottish Terrier might be a small dog, but they can be a very powerful dog. And if they get frustrated, they might nip you and bite first, ask questions later. I had a Cairn Terrier, so no judgment. I like terriers. I think that's just part of what you have to like about them, that they teeth first sometimes and think later, but that they're very forward-minded and they're high drive. And if you try to make that dog live in a box and never have an outlet, if you try to make that dog just a pet, I'm not saying that that high drive Scottish Terrier can't be a pet, but that he really needs a chance to engage in what he's meant to do. Like if he doesn't get out and get a chance to dig and run around and ferret things out in a safe enclosed area where he can't get away.
As dog trainers in New York City, I think sometimes we see people with dogs that are that need, like, physically need more space or need more time.
And it's not a judgment if that is not what you signed up for, and that may be the dog you get when maybe that wasn't, that wasn't the relationship you wanted with a dog. Maybe you didn't want to be out hunting rats every night. I'm a crazy terrier person. I would love to do that with my dog. But you have to want it. And if you want a dog that's going to lounge on the couch, then maybe, the Shih Tzu or the Pug is the better option.
Well, I know there's so much out there, there's so much snobbery in the world of purebred, the purebred dog world. I think about like the designer dogs, the doodles, where I think, like, for how many centuries have we bred dogs who can thrive in the environment that we're asking them to live in, like whether that's hunting or chasing or pointing or or like looking cute and being quiet on the princess's lap.
right and I think it's okay to want to it's okay to want to breed dogs for pets. Like doodles obviously fill a niche that people were looking to fill because there are so many of them.
And of course there's well-bred doodles and not well-bred doodles, but there are plenty of people out there who turn up their nose. Well, it's not really a breed. Like, fine.
Oh,
whatever.
And I was absolutely one of them. Again, as I said in the beginning, I am a reformed dog snob. And so hi, my name is Jen. I used to be a dog snob. I absolutely was on the train. All doodles are crazy. It's a breeding disaster. And, actually shelter work, cruelty work changed me because we had a dog come. Well, we had a couple of doodles come through, but there was one in particular that came through that was just the absolute cutest thing. He was a big doodle. He was so sad. He was emaciated to within an inch of his life. And he was so sweet and so affectionate. And, that was sort of like it sounds stupid and simple unless you've been in this dog world. But at that moment, I realized that doodles are just dogs. How could I judge this dog in front of me? It's not his fault. He's a doodle, and for whatever reason, it's been drilled into me that was unacceptable, and it just stopped.
And there's a reason people like these relatively small, non-shedding dogs who are often very smart. That have some attributes of whatever other breed. Like, and it's not a crime to want something that looks like a teddy bear.
Right. And I think the unfortunate thing is it's the stock you start with. If these breeders aren't starting with good quality doodles or poodles or goldens and aren't doing health checks before they breed the dogs and verifiable health checks, taking structure and temperament into account, it's unfortunate that there are doodle breeders that are very clearly taking advantage of the dog shortage that many cities seem to have right now, including ours.
But going back to what we were talking about, clients with the dog that's just like the wrong dog for their household, I feel like that's a weird part of a dog trainer's job, as I see it.
Yes.
Is sometimes to have to point that out and say, like, nothing against you as a dog owner, but this is just not a good fit.
I've had people cry with relief when I've told them that, because they're afraid to tell people that this might not be a match and that maybe they and the dog's quality of life would be better if the dog was somewhere else. And people are afraid to say that because they'll get judged. And again, there may have been a time where I would have been one of them, and I just there was no point to it. There's no purpose. Like, rehoming a dog is best for people and dogs. There's no reason to keep suffering if it's not a match. But it is a hard thing to hear sometimes, I think, as an owner too. It's a hard point to know when to bring that up. if you notice it as a dog trainer, if you think it might not be a match, but you're not sure if the owner's on board.
It's so hard. I feel like really, like, it really is a lot of therapy that like private dog training.
We do so much therapy, dogs and people. It's just I think that, you know, I think that walks with a dog should be enjoyable for both the dog and the owner, for example. And, you know, but at the same time, I think the expectations have to be realistic for what the dog is going to be able to adapt to.
Now you're doing private training and it's like
going into people's homes, and sometimes it's a very stressful, emotional situation that we're walking into. It really is. And, you know, there's attachment and guilt, and, you know, a lot of times too, I think in New York City, we have the extra neighbor shaming component. Whether it's, you know, barking has to be stopped because of people in the building complaining to management, or, you know, just neighbors screaming and shouting in fear when they see the dogs. So sometimes it's asking the dogs and people to cohabitate in New York City is really, there's an extra layer of tough that dogs just don't necessarily encounter in other places.
Yeah. Where, like, in other places, like, you might your next door neighbor might be 1,000 miles away, right? That's true.
The good thing about
I've
New
never
York,
thought about that like you have more eyeballs and ears on your dog because we all live in tight quarters and people have these high expectations.
Yeah, in the suburbs, like, it was very much like a cry it out was normal, and the dogs would just get over it after a while because nobody was around to hear it, because nobody lived close enough. It's a very different lifestyle. I do think in New York, guardians, owners tend to address things sooner, because with trainers, because the dog can't just be like put in a backyard and put away. They sort of have to deal with things as they crop up sometimes.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
It's just been an interesting transition, because especially having traded the suburbs before, it's sort of a different, it's the same problems, but the dogs do get out for leash walks. So the training opportunities come a lot more regularly. They can encounter people and dogs in crowds.
So
that can be a little ambient.
It's so true.
It's instead of like, oh, that one-on-one, oh my God, there's a person coming from 2,000 feet away and I can see them walking the whole time and now I'm going to bark. Like that's sort of the suburb experience.
You know, maybe that's one reason why dog sports are not as popular, in my experience, in urban environments. I mean, one, obviously, is space, but also, like, where you could work with your dog without having to go to an arena to do it.
Yes.
Maybe that's what, like, people in the burbs who are going to do those things.
Yeah, they have to like make their own
project.
Distractions. Yeah, we live around the distractions. We don't need to make up anything. I do try to find, I mean, I like it that New York has so many green spaces, even little green spaces. Obviously, I'm not letting the dogs, you know, climb into things, but there's so many places that I can stop and let the dog sniff and decompress. Like, we try to have mini sniffaries on a lot of my training sessions, you know, finding little tree
sniffari,
boxes.
That's such a good word. I love that.
Oh, yeah. I forget who coined it. I think I saw it in Whole Dog Journal, but decompression walks just sounds so formal. Sniffari. It made me giggle. I feel like a 5-year-old saying it, but I love it. And it's just, I let the dog lead and sniff for as long as they want, and they can weave and bob. And it's just, the studies are showing that sniffing actually lowers a dog's heart rate. And I certainly want that from my dogs in New York City.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, my sniffaries.
Sniffari. Anything we haven't touched on that?
Oh my gosh, we touched on so much.
I know, we've touched on so much. Well, I'm thrilled that you are part of the School for the Dogs team.
I'm thrilled to be here.
It's really interesting and exciting to hear your path.
It's fun. I enjoy working with dogs. So many of my clients are so into the training, or, you know, into seeing what the dogs are doing. And it's just nice. It's nice to work with happy people and happy dogs after shelter work. It's kind of nice.
Well, I'm glad that we're able to provide you with that.
And you'll have to meet Poppy. I've started bringing
Our
we'll
poppies,
have to have
yeah.
our poppies meet. I've started bringing
Yeah.
my Poppy to work, my dog Poppy. And I understand you have a dog named Poppy. So
Yours is a
we'll have to get
Pop-Tart,
them
right?
together.
Her official name?
Yes, she's Pop-Tart.
Her nickname of her name.
Yes. Well, yeah, when we register her, it's going to be
Ours is Popsicle. Yeah.
Popsicle. Oh,
well, she started out as Poppy, but she has become Popsicle.
I saw a video of her playing with Anna's dog Ginger and just bobbing all over Ginger's head, and Ginger just putting up with it and lying down and just going, all right. Poppy looks fun.
Like a puppy. She's like a little over a year.
Poppy, Poppy as well. She's like a year and a half. So,
and my biggest complaint, not really I don't have any complaints about Poppy. I love her to death. But the thing that I'm having the most trouble with is and it's not a training challenge. It's just about time. Is like finding the time. Specifically, I want to work with her and her nails because she has really bad nails.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's on my list too. Same. Oh my goodness. We have parallel poppies right now.
I need to like. I just feel like I have so.
I know we have to do the little bit every day. Here's the dog trainer dilemma. Like the dog trainer's dog isn't getting trained because I'm doing 5 minutes every day with client dogs and writing about it, talking about it. I don't want to get home and do 5 minutes of deconditioning with my own dog, and I just gotta do it.
I know. Well, maybe we need.
I tried to, I'm so tempted to just sit on her and do it, but I know I need to be kind and do it slowly.
Maybe we need to have like accountability meetings on it. Or make a date.
I like it.
Maybe we could make a date. We can
do scratch board sessions. Yes,
I'm serious. Like maybe
I like it. I am too.
I need to set like a date. I think in order to make this happen, and if I just have no one to be accountable to, I probably won't do it. Not out of lack of interest. Just
all right. Now we're gonna do it.
It's like
a reminder. It's just ADD. I can't focus on. I have all these other things to focus on. I can't remember to do that. I'm lucky. I feed and dress myself.
Yeah. We need dog trainers to work with us. That's part of also what dog training is. It's like keeping people accountable,
That's true. People are surprised when I tell them I take classes, that I've never stopped taking classes. I take classes online. I've taken classes with Denise Fenzi online for years. And because I don't know, I don't know everything about dog training. I don't know how to train everything. I certainly don't know how to decondition
you don't know everything?
Are you going to... I'm out of here. We wish you well on your endeavors.
Why did we hire you?
Sorry. I may have misrepped. I don't actually know everything.
Jen, thanks for talking. I'm sorry this went on longer than I thought it would.
Thanks for having me.
There's just so much to talk about.
No, that's okay. I hope we got some good content. I'm happy to get on any soapboxes anytime you want. Oh, this was great. This was fun.
Yeah, really, really interesting. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon and see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Annie.
Bye.
Bye.
School for the dogs.
Thank you so much for listening. And special thanks to Bill and Lizzie of Toast Garden for the amazing theme song. You can find Toast Garden at youtube.com/toastgarden. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on iTunes. You can also support us by shopping at storeforthedogs.com, and you can learn more about us at schoolforthedogs.com. You can also connect with other listeners by downloading our brand new app. Just visit schoolforthedogs.com/community.